Good morning. It's day 2 of the Family Business Life 9-day transformation challenge. And whoever is watching, whether you're watching live, whether you're watching by the on demand replay, listen, day 3, this tells you something good is happening because it's not day 1, it's not day 2, it's 3. That means we have been getting some things going. And listen, we had James Powell on day 1 for the Mastermind experience. We had Lynn and Weaver on day 2. And man, just the fire was falling. Now, we about to get some more fire. And you say, Leo, what's all this about the fire? Well, we're gonna talk about that. Actually, I think no. It's gonna be a couple of days from now. We're gonna be talking about fire specifically when we get into talking about the accurate beliefs because there's an important perspective. But remember, we're talking about the reality of family life crashing and burning, and fire is good when used in a way that's of value. And that's what we've been experiencing, fire falling that is in a most unique, valuable, and beneficial way. So glad for all of you who are tuning in, be it by live or by recording on demand. Listen, this is going to be exciting. Um, we've been talking about family, business, life mastery, focusing on family life and business life. The lunch and learn has been exciting for me. I think it's been exciting for some folks, so much and so on the first day, somebody said, "Ooh, gourmet food is what we got." But today we got a unique conversation we're going to have. Last couple of days we had some high performance coaches, speakers. Today we got a speaker who's also an aspiring author, but also a ministry leader and a former football coach. And the reason I use the former football coach is because he's still a coach, but that former football, like that aspect in there, let's go talk about some things because coaches, as it pertains to those who coach sports teams and things of that sort, they know a little bit about the family life crashing and burning possibilities. So we're gonna talk about some things, and I like the fact that the guy that I'm bringing in has that background as well as that ministry background because he can really talk about what it looks like from the standpoint of the executive level, somewhat of the business owner level, just because of the manner in which you have to take ownership of your roles and responsibilities as a coach, but also kind of that CEO level too, because there's an aspect in there that speaks to the family dynamics that he's going to really talk about with regard to goal setting and all of that. And so, listen, let me go ahead and bring my man in, Brandon Bell, ministry leader at Singing Oaks Church out in the Dallas somewhere area. Brandon, how are you doing this 6:30 Central Time AM on this day 3 of the Transformation Challenge? 9 days, mind you.
Well, thanks for asking, Leo. For being out with college students till after midnight last night with my campus ministry and waking up at 5 something, I'd say I'm doing great. I'm feeling better than anticipated, so that's good.
Awesome, awesome. So you guys jump in the chat for those who want to. It's not a requirement, but hey, get in the chat. Let us know what's going on. Let us know what you think. Let us know how you feel. Let us know what you're getting. Give us some feedback of the things that are being shared. Look at you. Look at you. We got Mr. Awareness Elevation himself in the house. I got some other folks, I'm sure, coming in. But all right. So we have been talking about family life, business life. Um, the lunch and learns have focused on two of the misleading beliefs. First one being work life balance, believing that work life balance is something to be achieved. The second one being believing that you must choose, between family life and business life. And then, in those mastermind experiences with James and Linan, we've talked about for sure the whole constructs and thought processes of family business, life mastery, and high performance, and going beyond just peak performance to high performance that is on that trajectory of over the long term continuously achieving at the highest levels and not necessarily dealing with peaks and valleys, but maybe some moments of drops and experiences, all of that. But you got something different. And when I say different, I don't mean that it's necessarily different in the sense of what the perspectives and the constructs are, but you have some experience with regard to family life and business life that, especially in our first conversation related to our pre-challenge call, you talked about, how you had to make some shifts. So listen, talk to us about those shifts that you had to make and the things you felt. And trust me, I'm gonna take you on the journey with your conversations and perspectives. Let's go.
All right, Leo. Well, hey, thanks again. Thanks for being willing to have me on. And I've been blessed by our time already. The first 2 days have been awesome. So thank you to James and Lynn Ann. You guys rocked it yesterday morning. And so I'm excited. But yeah, I'm thankful that my story, my path, God brought me into ministry, wasn't just right out of the gate. It took a while. And so I spent some time, in the secular world with a coaching and teaching job. And my big goal, I'm a bigger basketball fan than football, but I live in Texas. So, you know, you have to coach football. Unless
Yeah.
you're the head basketball coach, you're coaching football too. And I learned to really love it, but I didn't quite love it as much as everybody else did around me.
Okay.
And so that was kind of one of my aha moments early on. We had just gotten married. I had actually coached 1 year before we got married. So I kind of already knew how intense it was. But my wife didn't quite understand how intense those hours are during football season, followed immediately by basketball season. So we're talking, around 70 hours a week, only Sundays off. And some coaching staff, they work Sundays too during football season. But I was fortunate to not have to. Anyway, early on, our marriage was struggling because of the hours. When I looked at my job, it's fun, it's rewarding, it's cool. I love working with kids. I love sports. I love competing. But my wife, one thing I learned about her, I didn't know going into marriage. I learned that her love language, her main love language, is quality time.
Mm.
Doesn't have to be a date, doesn't have to be anything special. She just wants me around, even if I'm just sitting on the couch with her watching TV. And so there was this big disconnect because I didn't quite understand that was her main love language. You're still learning each other early in marriage and, well, forever in marriage, right? But it took me a while to catch on to that. And so it got to the point where, she just flat out hated my job. She hated it. And so it caused some friction, some animosity there. And my thought was always, hey, I'm just going to sprint through these seasons, and then the off season's coming. And then better yet, summer's coming, and we'll make that up. And so to me, it was like, hey, just let me do my thing and be all in for a little while. And then we'll focus back on us. And it took me quite a while to figure out, no, that doesn't work for her. You can't put relationships on hold for a season. I
Mm.
figure out how to pour into them. And I think I learned a lot by observing as well. I felt like to some extent, it seemed like the football coaches, we came just shy of like putting the football on the altar and bowing down to it.
Yeah. Mm. Mm.
It's such an idol, especially in this state. It's such an idol. And so there was just something about that. I was like, man, do you guys even like going home? Y'all not want to go home?
Oh
And I
man.
realize I think that's a struggle. I think that's a struggle in so many jobs. We feel like we're really gifted, we're really talented at what we do under our job title and in our careers. And there's measurables, right? Like I know my business is
Yeah.
thriving because all these numbers add up, and my win and loss record is adding up really well in coaching.
Oh
And
boy, you hitting it early.
right, these are measurable. And then I go home and I don't have those measures, right? I don't have the
Ooh.
scoreboard. My wife doesn't put a scoreboard up on the wall. We'd have some issues if she did, right?
Ooh.
And
Oh
so,
man, you hitting it good.
so yeah.
Man, listen, you hit it. And so I want to jump in on you in the
Go
sense
ahead.
of I want to steer you in the direction of something you talked about. Now, you talked about a number of things. Um, First, the thing that I don't want you to talk about this. We might come back to this, but I just want to bring it up in weaving in the thing that I want us to talk about. You talked about the scoreboard. That was the last thing. And there's no scoreboard at home. And I'd argue that there is. It's just a different type of scoreboard, right?
Yeah.
But that's a different conversation. I think that one of the things you really touched on, because as you were talking about, man, a little tear come. Man, let me just tell everybody. If y'all look at my eye, I got this thing where I got sensitive eyes. And if something get in it, it just like gets irritated. And so if you see a little tear, it's not because I'm just touched. I might be, but that ain't why. Okay. so so you talked about how y'all didn't really talk about in depth what it looks like, for you to, coach football those 70 hours. So y'all might have mentioned some things, but it's like, she really didn't know. You knew coming in, so on and so forth. A lot of people would say, this is not what we're going to talk about. I'm going to transition it. A lot of people would say, well, because I thought it as you were saying it, that oh you should have had that conversation a little more in depth, really talked about it a little more, like really say, hey, you got to understand this is,
Mhm.
that would not have necessarily helped because the experience of it is a different dynamic. Okay, so you come into the marriage, even if you would have had a conversation about it, when you come into the marriage, you did what most people are unwilling to do. And man, this is getting into what I talk about in my book, I Hate My Wife. You did what most people, man or woman, are unwilling to do, which is to say, this is important to me, but I need to make this person more important to me. In other words, I need to make them a priority. And whatever is important to me needs to flow within the context of the priority that I have for them. And you said, and this is what it sounds like you said, tell me if I'm wrong on this. You said, I need to posture myself with the context of my profession, my business life, so that it does not disrupt my family life, so that I can have a congruence between the two. Is that what you said?
Basically, yes.
Ooh, talk about how you came to that place, because this is something huge that I really talk about as it pertains to family life and business life, being teammates. So talk about
Mhm.
how you came to that point, the things that you thought about, like give it to us.
Yeah, first of all, I did, over my time in coaching, even though it was a short teaching and coaching career, I made some changes. I saw districts and coaching coaches and programs that were not as demanding, as intense, that were more respectful of family time, more respectful of family priorities, and so that helped. And knowing, my wife, knowing I was willing to make those changes to make things better for us, that was a huge thing for her. She just needed to know I was willing, right, to make
Mm,
these kinds of changes. Let me fast forward really fast. I'm now a full time minister. This is a few years back, and marriage, we've had our ups and downs, and our last our last big struggle, about 4 years ago, I think 4 years ago. Um, she hit me with the, "Hey, do we need to get a divorce?" Very,
mm,
like one of those where, whew, everything just stood still, right? And honestly, where we were and where I was in my head, not in my heart, but in my head, um, it was real hard not to say, "Yeah, I think we do." And it was a tough moment, a very emotional moment. And but I let her know. I said, "Hey, look, we've got to do." And at this point, I'm in the role I'm in now, college minister.
okay.
And us ministers don't like admitting that we have those kind of conversations.
Mm,
So I'm being vulnerable with this, but in that moment, I said, look, if you think, because I still would get the you pour more into the ministry than you're pouring into our family,
Mm-hmm.
which I hadn't always taken well because I haven't always thought that her view on that was fair. But what I told her, I said, look, I'm willing to do whatever it takes for us to work. And so if you're convinced that my job is a problem, I'm willing to change jobs. And she knew for me, what I've always wanted so desperately is to not live in Texas. Nothing against Texas specifically, but I want to live in the mountains. I want to live by the beach. I want to live somewhere much more adventurous and outdoors.
Yeah.
And she's a homebody, and all of our family is here. And so, and I said, if I need to change careers, and if we need to move and just have a fresh start, like whatever it takes, I'm willing to do that. And that's all she needed to hear. I could see it in her eyes that meant the whole world to her, knowing in that moment that our family and our marriage was the most important. And so that changed everything for her. The very next day, I get on the computer when I get home from work, and I realize her Google search that day had been, what are the best mountain towns to raise a family? What are the best school districts in Colorado? What housing and like these places she knows I want to live one day. And that meant all the world to me, just knowing she was serious too. It didn't take either one of those. God was working through us in some different ways, and we came through that. And every storm, every valley we've ever had in marriage has been followed by an awesome peak and by really good stuff. And a lot of people aren't willing to kind of ride those things out and make the adjustments that they need. A lot of times it is work and family conflict, and it is those paradigm shifts and mindset shifts. And so anyway, I don't know if that answered the question very well, but that's
Man, that hit it to where, you know, Lynanne yesterday, I told her she was triggering me, and you come on here, you doing the same thing. Like I don't, what y'all got on Leo, have him over here like, uh, so again, you said a number of things, and real quickly, you said it didn't take either one of those things. All right.
Mhm.
God was working in that. I'll come to that in just a moment. Before I come to that, I want to deal with the power of the conversation. And let me set it up for you. James talked about the importance of asking the question, I say I will die for my family, but
Mhm.
will I live for my family? And I remember you actually responding to that.
Yeah, that's
And what you did was, see, some people will look at what you said to her was you're willing to die. No, you were not saying I'm willing to die. Because let me give you an example of what I'm willing to die would be. I will come off of my job and we'll just figure it out. That's dying. And don't get me wrong, that can work. It's gonna be tough. So she can have quality time. That's like, an extreme. You said, I'll look for another job that will be more suitable for the dynamics that we need. And what you essentially were saying, remember, I say this, and this is so befitting for a coach, because you said this to me. You said, I'm really still a coach, everybody still calls me coach and all that. You are. Just absolutely. I just wanted to put form on that because people know, context. But this is so important in the sense that what people have got to understand is family life and business life are meant to be teammates,
right.
not opponents. And so what you said was, babe, I'm going to prioritize you, but I need to make sure that I keep the professional in the queue in a way that's going to ensure that it enriches us and me. All right.
Mhm.
That goes back to what the apostle Paul talks about in his letter to the Philippian church. He says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than ourselves. Then he says, just to give clarity, let each one of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. And I always say in regard to that, that in the simplest way, what Paul is saying is this is the interest of others. It's more significant. This is your interest. Embed your interest in the interest of others and prioritize their interests without sacrificing your interests.
Mhm.
That's coming fully alive. That's what you did. Now, with that, it transitions to where both of you all were willing to fully come alive for each other,
Yeah.
and the conversation. Listen. I want people to see this because a lot of times they deal with difficulties, and in dealing with those difficulties, instead of them understanding that the difficulties are designed to create progress for them, they look at it as it is designed or is being destructive to them.
Mhm.
Y'all saw that neither one of those things were necessary, and ultimately, God was doing something different, such that the truth became that the conversation was necessary in order for there to be an essence of communication, connection, and unification. Talk about what you all experienced in that moment when you realize just because you heard it from one another, just because you saw each other's willingness to fully come alive, that this is going to like be a difference maker for us.
Yeah, I think just recognizing in those moments, recognizing that we really were the priority, that we were worth sacrificing some other things for, is what we needed to know. Because you get busy, you get into the grind, and you're in these rhythms, and you've been married a while, and you're used to things, and so you can just work on some assumptions, but you need that clarity, that communication has been so huge for us in our marriage. It's what's got us through some tough times, and just being able to be honest and be real, and to follow those things up with action. So I think making sure one of the rhythms in life, especially in those busy seasons and football season, right? And the big pushes at the first or the end of the year with business, those seasons, is making sure you're prioritizing and being very strategic and intentional with your quality time together, because we can't just be ships passing in the night, passing down the hallway, passing the kids around. Like, we've got to be intentional and have those moments where we get real with each other and we communicate. Because I think the main reason relationships break down is it's always a lack of communication, quality, good communication. So, I mean, you couldn't operate your business without having some real business meetings, right?
Man,
Clear communication. You couldn't operate those things at a high level, but yet we'll settle for just the busy passing each other back and forth. Let's just talk about dinner and who's taking the kids where, and
yeah,
like, you can't operate at that level without crashing and burning. So communication
man.
is massive.
You so you actually introduced what I wanted to shift to with regard to business, because there's this mirroring of commitment and time, energy, and effort that comes with sometimes business life that a lot of times we kind of underestimate. And I want to talk about this in the context of why balance doesn't work. But before I do that, I want to share with you, something that you were talking about. It made me resonate with this thought process. There's a speaker coach that I follow. His name is Myron Golden, and powerful presenter, powerful teacher and communicator. And he even has what he calls the King Solomon's inner circle, where he teaches people the wisdom of King Solomon in how to build their businesses, and he teaches people the biblical perspectives and wisdom that help them to propel. And one of the things he talks about is three different frameworks. One, which is the platform of life that God built. One, that is, he established time, space, and matter. That's the platform that we exist upon. He said, then he created the parameters for us. And those parameters are to be, do, and have, right? Be fruitful, do multiply, do replenish, do, subdue, and then have dominion. And then he created the process, meaning the means by which everything is to come about and we are to operate. And in that process is from top to bottom imagination, communication, unification, and implementation. And one of the things that I saw in all that you said about how you and your wife engaged and dealt with certain things was you really touched on all of those, but the pivotal one that connects everything is communication. Like communication is what connects imagination to the unification to the implementation. And so when you handle communication well, it shows that things are pivotal. Not to mention, we know how powerful communication is because, back in Genesis, when God saw that the people were building this tower to heaven and all that kind of stuff, the thing that he disrupted was their ability to communicate, because their ability to communicate connected with their imagination, unification, and implementation of what they were achieving. So they were divided and separated by virtue of communication. So if you don't know how important communication is, just know that it's one of the processes that the Almighty used to disrupt people's moving forward. Okay,
Right.
that means it's very unique and unifying. That's a whole nother conversation right there, because I can take you into a message in a moment, but we're not gonna do that. So the thing that I'm really seeing as a picture in my head from everything that you're saying, Brandon, is bringing me into business life, right? In this sense that you're not saying that my family life, and specifically we're dealing with the wife, because that was the one that there was the marital relationship, I'll put it in that terms. That was the relationship that was the most challenging. That was the one that was challenging you the most. That was the one that was creating the most transformational opportunity. Let me make this as a side note. This is the 9-day transformation challenge. And the point is to challenge what you think and believe in order to create the situation, circumstance of experiencing transformation. What you've got to know is in life, challenges come for transformation. Okay. You've got to understand that if there's no challenge, there's no transformation. Come on. I got to say this again. If there's no challenge, you ain't going to get, I know it's not correct English. I just got to say it this way because we understand it well sometimes when it's said in bad English. You ain't going to get no transformation. There must be challenging of us within us in order for transformation to be a reproduction for us. So with that, as we look at this business piece, which I'm really enjoying how it's just emerging in everything that you're saying, and that is this: you were not saying that family life is such a priority that you need to choose it over business life. Yes or no?
No.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. I want everybody to know that's not
Right.
what you were saying.
What if it came down to that? Like your
If it came down to that.
That's the thing. Your family needs to know that, and they don't always know that. They may think it's the other way around.
And see, here's the thing. It's not necessary to choose between the two, but I get what you're saying, that you needed to communicate how
Right.
much of a priority they were.
Right.
Now that's different between choosing between the two.
Mhm.
When you're making family life a priority, you're essentially saying, if I choose business and say, hey, family is just getting in the way, what's going to happen is I'm going to not only misalign myself, I'm going to actually put myself in a destructive position, because family has a pivotal contribution in my life holistically. That's what you're saying. Now,
Right.
with that, one of the things you've said, and I love this football coach thing, because sometimes, and this is where, even though your wife's love language is quality time, things of that nature, This is where it's like the challenge really requires some aspects of growth, because sometimes this is why you can't balance family life and work and business life, nor can you balance work life, because sometimes you have to put more of your energy into the business life. Even right now, even though it's not 70 hours like it was then in the football coaching,
Mhm.
there's times where it's like late nights, it's early mornings. Like this morning, it was a late night and an early morning because Leo had said, "Hey, come on and be a Mastermind experience guest," right? And so, for the CEOs, for the business owners, for the executives, because man, that's the role you play. Like, I think too many people look at the position itself as, oh, if you have this title, you're CEO, business owner, executive. You've got to look at what the expectations of your roles are that determines what type of true expectation of CEO, business owner, executive. And you had the dynamic of many CEOs, many business owners, many executives, to where at many points in growing something professionally, it may require that time to get it to where it needs to go. Talk about when 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 it is necessity to put in that time and energy while the family is still in the queue, and it may not be the quality time. Like, how do you navigate that in conversation and interactions?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think, we use the word balance a lot, but I really think a better word is rhythms.
I love that one.
For instance,
Fits well with alignment and flow.
yeah, yeah. And for instance, look at the Ten Commandments. One of those that we forget about is the Sabbath.
Mm,
God intentionally wired us. He wired us. He even wired the ground. The land is supposed to have a Sabbath rest, and we've understood this now in modern times with agricultural science, so that the land has to have its rest. That you can't just keep farming
yeah,
and go
yeah.
the same plot. It needs to rest about every 7 years, which is exactly what God established
Come on now.
way back. And so we're wired the same way. We need those days of rest. And our work looks a lot different nowadays in the modern era than it did in the ancient times.
Yeah, yeah.
It looks a whole lot different. And so it's weird. It's easier for us because I don't have to work every day just to make enough food to eat, right? Uh, but it's harder to rest. It's harder to have those rhythms because there's just a million things for us to do 24/7. There's a way to
Mm,
take work with you on the computer and just constantly be in that mode. And so I really believe you have to be intentional, strategic with those rhythms to be able to pour all you got into both. Because without those rhythms and those priorities and the proper communication, you can't. I can't be all I've got to be for both without that healthier rhythm. Um, one thing Lynn Ann hit on yesterday that I thought was so good is she talked about, we're willing to put a ton of money into continued education. We're
mm.
willing to put a ton of investment into our business to grow, to be better at our profession and our craft, to improve in that area. But what are we investing into our families? Do we wait? I think in that regard, in business life, we're so quick to be proactive. I want to be better down the road. I've got these goals. I got this vision of where I want to be. Family life, we often relegate to just being reactive.
Mm.
I go with the flow until suddenly somebody's not happy. I go with the flow till suddenly my kids are off the rails, or, whatever, the finances are a complete mess. Whatever the case is, we end up being really reactive there. And so I love what she said about, being proactive and pouring into our families to better ourselves in our family roles. It's huge. We set goals in business life. And we got to set goals as a family, and that's that communication piece. And that's where, if you are married, that's where you're able to stay accountable.
Mm.
It does give you kind of a scoreboard in a sense, right? Are we
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
going to do this as a family? Are we doing this? Um, and I remember I was brand new in youth ministry. Of course, I didn't go to school to be a minister. I didn't go to seminary. I went to UNT right here where I'm doing campus ministry. And so when God put that call in my life and I became full-time in ministry, and I was like a sponge. I wanted to soak it all up because I didn't go to school for this. And so I went to my very first youth ministry conference and I loved it and it was awesome. Um, and so I'm looking for resources to better me as a youth minister, and I'm getting books and getting all these things. And I passed by one of my very favorite preachers, Tony Evans. If you don't know him, you need to know him. Passed by Tony Evans' book section, and there's this one, Raising Kingdom Kids, and I passed it right up because I'm thinking, oh, that doesn't have to do with youth ministry, And I think in my subconscious, I was thinking, I'm already a good dad and husband,
Mm.
I don't need to work on that. I need to, And so I remember passing the table, and then I feel like God just like hit the brakes on me, and I was like, wait a minute, why am I acting like I don't need more help in that regard? You know,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
I want my daughters to be like Tony Evans' daughters, Priscilla
yeah.
Schreier, right? Like I want to be the kind of leader in the home that guy is. And so I turned around and I went back and got that book, and for me, that was such a huge aha moment because I realized I'm really prone to that. I'm really prone to wanting to just think that I'll just by default be a good dad and a good husband without being proactive, without putting in the work, without, setting the goals and having that vision for who I need to be there. And I need to focus on being a better coach or minister or whatever my role is. So that's another one of my aha moments that I really appreciate what Lynn Ann said yesterday morning, on that same note. So
Man, I was actually going to ask you about that, and I'm still going to ask the question because I think there's a deeper aspect to it. She talked about how we don't even invest a fraction of the cost
mm,
in advancing our family lives in certain ways. And so my question was going to be, which is now going to be that um what was it as it pertained to you investing in yourself for your family? What was some of the things that you started doing and investing in your growth and development on the family side that you were already doing on the business side? And like, how did that create some leaps, quantum leaps probably for you?
my wife is really helpful. She's very quick to tell me when she feels or the girls feel that I'm putting way too much time in with other people, and not putting enough time in with them. She's really quick to tell me that. Sometimes, honestly, I don't know that it's always a fair assessment, but we talk through that, and I prioritize. And so, one thing I try to be intentional with is one thing that's cool about ministry versus coaching, or teaching or some other kind of work, is there's a whole lot of integration. There's a whole lot of things I can bring my family to
Mhm,
that I can
mhm.
do with them.
Yeah.
And that's huge, especially for what I do with ministry. I mean, for me, that's one of my biggest goals is for my kids. They don't have to be an official minister one day, but for them to see their life, their business as a mission, as a mission field, as a ministry, and so taking that with them. So I think my situation is pretty unique, but it's also extremely vital. And so that's the piece that's so much better for us as a family than back when I was a coach, because I'm able to bring them into a lot of the ministry I do, especially as my girls get older.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. Earlier this year, I had a Bible study. My assistant, who's a female, she and I had a Bible study with an Afghan student. Now she's one of the refugees who like escaped the country when the Taliban
Mhm.
took over just
Right,
over a
right.
year ago. Super sweet girl, and she was willing to have a Bible study with us. And so I brought my daughter with me, and she's an eighth grader. And I remember in that moment just thinking, man, this is so awesome that my kids getting to experience this. And when we left, I asked her, I said, hey, Mace, how many kids your age, how many American teenagers do you think had a Bible study with an Afghan refugee today? And she kind of gave me that look like, I might be the only one.
You might be.
Might be. And she was
Certainly in America.
cool. I was like, yeah, I think so too. So I'm trying to be a lot more intentional with bringing my family into, because especially with ministry, I can't be siloed, right? Like if I'm going to be an effective minister, ministry goes with me when I go home,
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
and it's not just me having to be the spiritual leader of my home. It's us leading together as a family. And so
Mm,
as my girls are getting older, that's becoming a lot more easy to do. I wouldn't, there's nothing easy about it, but
easier. Yeah.
you're more ready for that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can say that. And so I think that integration, and that's another thing I want to say. I think with a mindset shift and a transformation shift, it's really important for us to remember in America, in modern America, how absolutely weird and crazy we are. And we don't think about it.
Mm,
We don't know
talk
anything.
about that.
So think about it. If we got in a time machine, we went back and we talked to people from hundreds of years ago, and we try to explain to them that I, as a husband, I leave and I go work outside the home, some other thing not related necessarily to
Hmm.
what I do at home. I'm not hunting, I'm not farming, I'm not gathering, I'm doing some kind of other work. My wife also is leaving the home to go do some other kind of work. And we take our children as young as 3 years old and we outsource their education and we go drop them off with strangers
Mm.
to raise them for 8 hours a day or more. And then we come back and we have this hurried, you know, busy life, and we get just a moment together before we put everybody to bed and we wake up to do it all over again the next day. They would look at us like we were from another planet. They would look at us like we were completely out of our mind. And then they'd look at the stats of our society, the broken homes, mental illness, depression, anxiety, the
Man, you
incarceration
hitting it,
rates,
bro.
they go down the line and they go, "Oh, y'all are crazy,"
The data says so.
And so I think it's really important for us to remember just how our culture is so we're up against the wall.
Disintegrating.
You know what I'm saying? Like we're swimming upstream if we really want to raise a healthy family. We've got a lot of things against us that we don't even recognize.
Yeah.
We just don't even recognize. So I think, you may be hearing from me, it sounds like I'm saying you got to put a whole lot more into your family than business life. I, I kind of think you do because of the culture in which we live. Because
So
culture is against.
I want to touch on that. I want
Yeah.
to touch on that. And before we touch on it, I want to make note of something that I don't know if folks have really heard you say this a few times when, so let me back up. One of the things you talked about is being proactive rather than reactive, right? And I want to point out the fact that you use your wife's responses and your daughter's responses of them telling you what they feel about what's happening. You don't use it and react to it. You actually are very proactive about it because what you're doing is what I call using their feelings or their emotions as a data point to evaluate and consider what you're doing. So you don't just get what they say to you and then start automatically making adjustments. You start taking evaluation and seeing, okay, what are they looking at? And notice, everybody notice he said, he kept saying, I don't think it was necessarily a fair assessment.
Mhm.
which is saying that their feelings are legitimate,
Mhm.
but I've got to take them and appropriately focus them. That's
Right.
what we've got to do with our emotions holistically.
Right.
Okay, now
Good point.
with that, that shows also that there is this regard for not just family life and not just business life, but making sure there's an appropriate ebb and flow, and or as you said, integration. Like you getting into a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about in this Let You Learn stuff as we get further into the accurate beliefs and whatnot. Here's the thing. So you touched on, which I want to take it a little further in the, kind of going down toward the end of the hour. You touched on, I think that we need to put more into our family than we do into our business. And you all got to know he's talking also from being a family that's home educated, right? His wife is primarily the home educator. He didn't tell me that, but I just heard it, and it's like, yeah, they're a homeschool family. Am I right, Brandon? Oh, you're
No,
not?
mm-mm.
What?
No, my wife's a teacher.
Ah, Man, you sound like you were. I was
I'm,
like,
I'm more for it than I have before.
wow.
We may
Well,
become that soon, but we'll see.
so okay, that's what I heard. Okay, I knew
Yeah,
I heard something in regard to that.
I'm not
I
there
was
yet.
like, man, okay. Anyway, but here's what Brandon is saying. He's really not saying you need to go from your children being in school, where they're public school or private school, to home educating them. He's not saying that. If it works for your family and you've evaluated and you see that this is the best trajectory, cool. What he's saying is, because we have such an inundation and a primary focus from a cultural perspective on your career, your business. Like, think about this question that people ask children: what do you want to be when you grow up? If a child says, I want to be a husband or a wife or a mother or a father, people look at them, what? And oh, I can't tell you how many of the conversations I've heard with the babies about that. Okay. But they're looking for you to say, this is my career. This is what I want to accomplish. This is the type of assignment I want to have professionally, right? And so what Brandon is saying is that what we need to do is we need to have more of a focus on family life so that we can have an appropriate focus on business life. And let me just be very clear. What he's saying is, the reason family life is crashing and burning is because we're not giving the energy to family life that we ought to give. So that's what he means by we need to actually give more attention and energy and commitment to it. It's not to say that we just go and drop business. And I want to share this real quickly before we kind of have a conversation on this. One of the reasons I'm so intimately connected with the problem of family life crashing and burning while business life is thriving and vibing for professionals at large with families, but in general with CEOs, business owners, and executives, is because I was put in a position to where at a certain point things didn't go in certain ways professionally for me, and I had to be with my family almost 24 hours trying to rebuild my career, my future. And in those moments is where I really saw a lot of the breakdowns, the disconnects, the frustrations, the the disintegration that existed, and all sorts of just chasms of confusion. And like, it's like, why are you trying to balance something? Why are you trying to choose between, when the truth is, if we give the appropriate focus to family life, we will see it lend and produce value from it into the business life. What is it that you saw in regard to that, and how, when you got that, I guess you could say, aha of that, it
Mhm.
really just shifted and changed the game for you?
Yeah, no, that's the perfect setup, Leo. Because
Sweet,
well,
brother.
because you're making me think. I know from ministry, if I don't myself stay re-engaged, reconnected, or constantly replenished with my own personal connection with God, if I just get busy doing a ton of ministry and church stuff for other people, eventually, and I've been there many times before, eventually I'm running on an empty tank,
Mm,
and I'm trying to pour from an empty cup
mm,
because I haven't focused on my own relationship with God. I've been worried about serving and being all these different things, these different roles. And so I know that doesn't work.
mm.
And I think for those working in the secular world, your refilling, your reconnection, in order to pour from a full cup, is most likely your family. You know, if you're a believer, it's that connection with God, and that should be integrated as well. Your family and God, and that relationship dynamic, but your family life should be pouring into your business life, because you're filled with your most important role. Okay, your most important calling, is being well taken care of,
Yeah.
and you're filled with what you need to be for the work life. And so it feeds into that. And so I want to share. This is the most important thing I have to say. Okay, this whole morning. Most important thing I have to say. So if you checked out, you started, ADD, and just bring it back in for this last story. Okay, I know we got a lot of stories this morning, but this is the most important one. So back about 4 years ago, I'm driving home from the campus center. We're out here in my office, and I'm heading home, and I'm about to turn on the road that takes me to our house. And it was one of those really, really rare moments where my mind was a complete blank, which rarely happens. My mind's constantly thinking about something. Also, another rare moment was the radio wasn't on in my truck. It was just silence in my truck, silence in my head. I'm not thinking about anything but driving. Rarely ever happens. And in the silence, in that moment, God spoke to me. Now, this may sound weird for you. It wasn't audibly like you're hearing my voice now. It was an internal monologue, kind of, like right now, if you quote the Pledge of Allegiance in your head right now,
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
you can hear it, but you can't hear it, right? You can hear it inside, but you can't hear it audibly. So that's how this voice happened. And it happened in a conversation. Okay. And it went like this. Hey, Brandon, you know how every time you preach, every time you go out and do evangelism in the streets and try to share, witness with people.
Hold on. Slow down. So we lost the connection like really quickly.
Oh no.
So you talking about the audible hearing. All right.
Okay.
Start there.
So you can hear a conversation in your mind, right, without hearing it audibly, right? Your inner monologue. So that's how this happened, right? That's how I can say I heard from the Lord. It was in here. It wasn't in here.
Gotcha.
So the word from the Lord came in the form of a conversation.
Okay.
As I'm driving on my way home. And he said, hey, Brandon, you know how every time you preach, every time you have a Bible study with somebody, every time you go out and try to witness to people, you always pray, God, fill me with the Holy Spirit, speak through me, and touch the hearts of the people I'm talking to. Pray that every time. Then he said, why aren't you praying that on your way home?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, like here I am. I'm at this point, I'm 10 years into being a father. I've been a dad for 10 years now. I've been a husband for 13 years, and I'm like, wow, how have I not thought of that before?
Yeah.
So with a whole lot of guilt and conviction, I prayed that exact prayer. God, fill me with the Holy Spirit, because when I walk in those doors, when I get home from work, I've got my agenda. I want to work out, I want to cook dinner. I'm the cook in the house. I want to work out. I want to cook dinner, maybe get some chores done around the house or the yard or something, and then if the Mavericks are playing or there's, I got my games I want to watch, I got my certain things I know I want to do. And so when I walk in the door, my wife's totally spent from teaching and she's emotional and she needs to talk. I don't necessarily have the patience I need for that in that moment. When my kids are pulling me in a ton of different directions. Hey, Dad, I got to go to my friend's house. I need you to drop me off. Like, I don't have the patience when I walk in the door for them that I need, because I'm too worried about all the things I want to do. And so it was a huge mindset shift and it was just such an awakening for me. It was like, no, I need to take that pause, take that moment and realize, okay, I've just left my ministry official titled job and I'm walking into my most important ministry, my most important calling. And I'm trying to raise them to be disciples and difference makers and world changers and lights in the darkness. So I've got to be ready to pour into them big time. And so I prayed this prayer. And here's the amazing thing. Here's the beautiful thing. That night, it was instant affirmation. Okay. Instant answer prayer, because we're sitting at the dinner table. It was one of those wonderful nights where we actually sat at the table and had dinner as a family. Okay. It doesn't happen near as much as it should. And I struggle. Like, I work with college students. Okay. I mean, yesterday I had a Bible study with a guy who just finished his PhD in physics.
Wow.
And I'm working with people way smarter than me. Okay.
Come on, bro.
So I'm used to a little bit higher level kind of stuff. Right. And when it comes to kids, I'm not so good at that. Like, I need my wife.
Hey, you thought so?
Well, yeah, yeah, I thought so.
Oh, you thought so?
Right. And so we're sitting at the dinner table, and I don't have anything. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a, hey, we're going to do this Bible study or anything like that. And my oldest daughter, who at the time she was, I forget, but she was
You
10.
said 4 years ago, so yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. She was 10. And so she just opens up with a question. It was a question about God or about heaven. And it started us out in this conversation. Well, this conversation lasted all through dinner, and it was really engaging, really exciting.
yeah, yeah,
My youngest girl, her eyes are lighting up with all these
yeah.
things, and the conversation carried us right past dinner and kept going. And then we paused to like get the kids ready for bed eventually, and all that kind of thing. And then we said our prayer before we put them to bed, and it was a much, much, much more meaningful, focused, you know, powerful prayer than our normal, typical, random Tuesday night before we trying to get the kids to bed and we're all losing our minds. It was a much more beautiful. And then get this, and of course, if you're not a believer, you may have a disconnect here, but just hang with me, okay? Try to get there. She, at the end of this prayer, my 10-year-old daughter, who had just been baptized earlier that year, a few months prior, she looks me in the eyes and she's like, "Dad, can't you just feel the Holy Spirit?" I was like, "Yep, uh-huh." You know? I mean, man, you talk about
Oh.
instant answer prayer, instant affirmation. It's like God's going, "See,
Oh,
Brandon?
man.
This is what I told you. Why didn't you ask a long time ago?" You know?
Oh,
It's a lot
man.
easier. So that was the biggest kind of eye-opening aha moment
Man,
for me.
so here's what we want to do. You guys who gotta jump off at exactly 7:30 Central Standard Time, go ahead. Brandon and I kind of close this down because it's too high to just stop it right now. So that's why it's on demand. You can stay live with us, but it's also on demand, so you can go back and check out this post experience because we're not done having this conversation. It may be 5 minutes, it may be 10 minutes, not sure. That just kind of depends on how much he needs to release, if you will.
Fire it up right
Um,
now. You ready? You ready?
he done got to the fire at the end. You know what I'm saying? um, one of the things that what you're talking about really resonates with is I have this concept, man. You're touching on a lot of the different things that are in the very constructs of what it takes to achieve family, business life mastery.
Mhm.
Uh, Look, let's put this on the screen so everybody can see what Larry said. Another amazing morning. Thank you, Leo and Brandon. God bless. Um, you've gotten into a lot of different things with regard to the what I call the trilogy of transformation that deals with and leads to family business life mastery. I'm talking about you dealt with the misleading beliefs without really getting into them, the accurate beliefs without getting into them, even the master keys without getting into them. And one of the things that I think really can help us sum this up. And, I'll leave you, kind of throw you a bone to where you can take this and run with it. And then, if you feel like you're done, then you can transition into, what is it that you want to call people to action and what offer you might have for them, what option or opportunity. Um, One of the things that I say is it's important to be present, to know how to be present
Yeah.
without being present, right?
Mhm.
And let me explain what I mean by that. There is the aspect of people are present, but they're not present. And see, that's what you were talking about. You were present physically, but you had checked out because you had come in, you got your own structure, strategy. There's no regard for what's really going on here and how you provide a certain level of leadership and comfort and all those types of things. None of that was in your mind. But when you had that moment of challenge, right? Because that's really what it was. You were challenged in what you were doing in business life and what you were doing in family life to position you to experience transformation in family life that not only was similar to business life, but that rivaled it, right?
Mm. Mhm.
And the reason I bring this up, and this ties back into what you said about, you know, making sure that, or not making sure, but the fact that we really need to put more into our family life than our business life. That perspective is so profound in this moment, because when we put more into the family life, and you said this almost verbatim, it pours into the business life.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that I tell people. When you eliminate family life crashing and burning, not only does your family life begin to thrive and vibe like the business life, but what happens is you begin to experience exponential value and opportunity in business life, to where you get exponential increase of productivity and profitability, right?
Right.
Because what you were saying was, when I come home, instead of me having agenda, and man, you're gonna hear how this ties into business life. When I come home, instead of me having an agenda, it's not that you don't have some things planned, but it's that you come in with your agenda, knowing that there are things you're gonna have to deal with that might not be on that agenda. That's
Mhm.
what we do with business. We might have a plan for the day, but we're coming into the office thinking about what are the things that are going on that we're going to have to address. I'll give you a perfect example. I got to a point in my executive roles, working with different business owners and CEOs. For example, when I was at UPS, I was in a situation where I was an executive but not titled an executive, because in the context of our center dynamics, our business manager was like the CEO, and we were like the executives, right? Like the VPs and the, you know, the COOs, etc., right? And
Mhm.
so that dynamic of our operation, like, we had our plan for the day, but one of the things we would do is we would come in and say, what are our problems and opportunities for the day? Like, it was on the agenda to
Yeah.
come in and look at the stuff that we really couldn't control, right? And so what you're saying is, when you begin to think from that different perspective, the same way you did in business, and look at it the same way in family life, you still had your agenda, but a part of the agenda was, what are the things I'm not planning for that I need to be ready for,
It's
right?
good.
You shifted your mindset
Mhm.
such that you were present, though you were not physically present. Like, what have you experienced in, you kind of talked about it, but I want it to be more so on this level, being that you begin to pray that prayer for the family, not just for the business, right?
Mm.
And you begin to, you know, that's just one example you gave us, but to know, as you begin to do that more repetitiously over the years, you found yourself in the position to where you literally were able to be present at home before you ever got there. Like, talk about what that feels like, what it looks like, it how it began to change not just your family, but change you.
Yeah, that's a great question because it affirms that priority. It gets your mind ready. I love the I'm gonna write that down when we get done. The
Being
opportunity.
present.
What'd you say? The opportunity. What are today's problems and opportunities? Or
Yeah, what are today's problems and opportunities that I can't prepare for?
right. Because I never know what I'm walking into when I get home. Never know. It could be a minefield of emotions, as my wife comes home tired from teaching, and so uh, I think having that mindset and being ready. Okay, God use me. God speak through me. Um, it's huge, and so and I wish I could honestly say every single day ever since that moment I've prayed that prayer
Yeah.
and been in that mentality. I haven't. It's something I have to constantly be reminded of. Um, I love having the opportunities to share that story like this morning because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
good for me for that reminder. But it's huge, when you know that you're walking into your highest calling when you go home. When you know you've got to think, okay, there's going to be a million, and as my kids get older, there's a million things vying for their attention. You talked about being present. One of the main ways that we're not present at all anymore is these things.
Oh, wow.
Can't stand them. They're a necessary evil. We got to have them to communicate and get where we need to go and all those things. But man, they're killing us, on so many levels. And so that's another thing that we've learned. We've got some rhythms in our weekly life. Like Sundays, phones we put them away. Um, we got to put them away so we can detach from the technology and connect better as a family, because we can all be in the same room and be just as far away as we are from each other right now. Um, so recognizing that, yes, you can be present in mind when you're away, and you can also be totally detached when you're in each other's presence. And
Yeah.
that's something we got to fight against in our digital society today with our families. So, yeah.
Tell me this, Brandon. Give us what it is what the action. Let me put this on the screen. This is putting our phones away to be present. That's fire. One of the things that I want to share a resource with everybody. This is a book that I have. I haven't completed it yet, but I think it would be a great resource. It's entitled 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You. It's by a guy
Well,
named Tony Ranke. 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You. And I like to tell people that it's important that I tell my children this. I was like, you need to understand this phone is a tool, right? Would you take a hammer and just start beating it over your sister's head? No. I said, so why would you take the phone and use it contrary to what it's really designed for, right? Now, when I say designed for, it's more of designed for by ultimate intention, not necessarily the one who actually created it, right? That's a whole other conversation. But um, one of the things that I just love about everything we've talked about, Brendan, is again how your entire story and experience really speaks to the fullness of family business life mastery, right? The trilogy of transformation that puts you on the trajectory for family business life mastery, and the reality that your being here is a part of being in the environment for people to invest in, right? I think that I do not believe, let's say it this way, I do not believe that we need to spend as much money as we are spending or investing in business to grow ourselves, that we need to do that in family life. But I do believe that if it takes it, we need to be willing to do it,
right.
right? We need to be willing to enjoy that benefit that's on the other side of the investment. I'll tell you why. Because it's not about the investment. I want everybody to hear this. I've talked about this in one of the other sessions, but it's got to be understood that every transaction is designed to be a transfer in the experience of transformation. So, in other words, there can be no transformation without some type of transaction. And
Mhm.
it can be as simple as challenging, something challenging you, right? And so, when it comes down to it, it's so important that everything that you've talked about really kind of culminates in it's necessary for us to make sure that we give value to the investment that we need to put into our family lives. And it's more important that we begin to think about, what do I need to invest in? Like, you got to be thinking about marriage conferences, marriage books. You've got to be thinking about parenting books. You got to think about even maybe writing some. We're going to come to that in just a moment because it goes with that. Uh, you've got to think about getting in the confines of people and having conversations and learning about things related to family life. Like, as much time, energy, and effort as we've put into business life. It's not
Mhm.
to say you need to put the same amount, but you need to be willing to invest, because here's what you got to understand. If you don't invest, you don't get a return, which
Right.
means if you have no transaction, you can have no transformation. And so if you want to eliminate family life crashing and burning, then what you need to understand is you have got to position yourself in an environment, in a community. And guess what? This can be one for you. Brandon will be back in this community. He's going to be giving more of his story and experiences. We're going to be hearing some things from, and you got some things coming up soon. Like, what do you want to leave with the folks so that they know what it is that they can do as far as connecting with you, or even, accessing some content or materials you have?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. I'm working on the book. It's called Trailhead: Beginning Your Journey with God, and it's really geared towards. It's accessible for anybody. It's really geared towards young adults and teens, and maybe somebody who's new to faith, doesn't know much about God, and it really starts at ground zero with reason to believe in God, and it builds from there. And so I'm really looking forward to when this book launches. Just a few more months, and we should be there. So I really recommend it for your families, for your kids. It may be a little higher level than for little kids, but if you've got teenagers at home, young adults that have left the house, that's the primary target audience for this. That I'm hoping is a tremendous blessing for you. For a thing to do, I'm going to highly recommend for anybody that's a person of faith, pray that prayer that I talked about.
Say it
God,
again for him.
fill me with your Holy Spirit, speak through me, and touch the hearts of my kids, my wife, my husband, my whoever it is, my parents, my siblings, like
Come on now.
whatever your home situation is, Lord, and I pray this one too, fill my home with your Holy Spirit.
Mm.
Because now listen to this, and whether you're a person of faith or not a person of faith, let me tell you something. If you're not praying for the Holy Spirit to fill your home and your family,
Ooh.
some other spirit will.
Ooh, come on,
Now,
Brandon B. Oh, that's the bell ringer right there.
and you don't want no part of that spirit in your home and in your kids and in your family.
Man.
So again, being proactive.
Man, Brandon, this was awesome, man. We've got to do this again. I knew this was going to be phenomenal. I knew that you were going to bring some great value in regard to just the context of family life and business life, with the dynamics that you experience as a ministry leader. Like, I've seen that firsthand. I grew up in it. I still have a good bit of that in my world today. So I was really looking forward to how you would approach that. So everybody, we are over the top of the hour. Y'all know that. But those people who are still hanging with us, thank you so much. Listen, 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, going to be Lunch and Learn number 3 for day number 3. And we're going to be dropping some more fire, focusing on the last misleading belief, the third misleading belief, and positioning you all to really understand the fullness of these 3 misleading beliefs so that we can transition on the next day into the accurate beliefs. But listen, Brandon gave us so much of a overarching perspective, and it's just really fueled me even more to give you some more of that value in the second experience on today. So listen, you guys go and have a wonderful rest of your day. Prayerful that this was not only challenging to you, but it was transforming to you, because that's the whole point for this 9-day transformation challenge. Y'all be blessed, be well, and have a great one until Lunch and Learn. Take care.